This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order and want to advise our committee members that with the few remaining days we have to work bills, please have any amendments to bills previously heard. Have those ready by tomorrow, Thursday. We're going to work as many as we can get to on Thursday so that we do not have to meet on Friday, February 17th. There are, as of right now, no other committees meeting on Friday other than Senate Ways and Means. So want to see if we can get our work done on bills previously heard, get that done tomorrow. So please bring amendments that you might have tomorrow. With that, then we will work two bills that we have previously heard, unless we are waiting on amendments. That would be Senate Bill 115 regarding adoption notices, where they have to be mailed to and who they have to be sent to, and Senate Bill 189 regarding law enforcement positions, candidates for those positions, and law enforcement agencies being able to share information about the application. So if we're not waiting on any amendments for those, I'd like to work Senate Bill 115. And if we could have just a brief bill brief from the reviser, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and good morning, committee. Senate Bill 115 is the bill that amends a provision in the Adoption and Relinquishment Act that deals with notice for adoptions. It essentially just clarifies who gets notice when you have an independent or step-parent adoption, who gets notice when you have a private agency adoption, and then for a public agency adoption makes clear that you're just dealing with the agency and not notifying any other parties that have already had their rights terminated and that sort of thing. So hopefully that refreshes your memory.
Thank you, committee. Any questions for the reviser, or is there a motion from the committee regarding the bill? Yes, Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we pass out Senate Bill 115. Favorable. I don't think it was amended.
Correct. Is there a second? Thank you, Senator Olson. Committee, you've heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, then on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. On Senate Bill 189, if we could have a bill brief as well, that would be helpful from the reviser. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. Senate Bill 189, you heard yesterday, that is the statute you passed in 2018. It's been effective for just going on almost 5 years now, that allows, or rather requires, applicants who are seeking law enforcement positions to sign a waiver to release all of the files and records that they may have about that person from a state or local law enforcement agency that employed them previously. And the bill adds any agency that interviewed that applicant or conducted a background investigation on that applicant, not just those that employed the applicant.
Committee, any questions for the reviser, or is there a motion on the bill? Thank you, Senator Olson, for the motion. Thank you, Senator Haley, for the second. Committee, you all have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Thank you. Committee, with that, then, we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 238, which increases the criminal penalties on drug-related crimes when the drug is fentanyl, and creating special sentencing rules. And with that, then, could we have a bill brief from the reviser? Yes, 238.
All right. Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. And I didn't introduce myself on the earlier microphone, so I'll make sure I do that this time. Jason Thompson, Office of Revisor of Statutes. You should have the bill brief in your packet. I'll try to keep it short. I know you've got conferees who want to talk about Senate Bill 238. As the chairwoman said, it does increase the criminal penalties for a couple of drug-related crimes. You'll see that Section 1 amends the definition section for our drug crime article in the criminal code. The definition that's added is in italics on page 4. Beginning in line 9, the definition is a new one, fentanyl-related controlled substance. And I'll mention briefly as an aside, this was drafted in collaboration with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Thankfully, the requesters gave us that permission to work with them. We were able to talk to some chemists and some folks who actually know what fentanyl we're going after. So this attempts to list all of the fentanyl-related substances that are in our Controlled Substances Act and make sure that those are covered by this definition without having to name them all one by one. So this was the solution we came up to name what you see as a number of substances that could be fentanyl and could find their way into a controlled substance that would be covered by this act. All right. I'll also note that the amendment the definition of manufacture is amended in this section. It includes placing a controlled substance into pill or capsule form. That's a thing that's kind of related to what you're doing here, and that's been appearing in a couple other fentanyl-related bills we've done, so the requester asked for that to be, or agreed to include that here as well. Section 2 then gets into the substantive change to the crime of unlawful manufacturing of controlled substances. That's KSA 215703. Current law would be that fentanyl-related controlled substance manufacturing is severity level 2, a drug severity level 2. The bill would make that a drug severity level 1, basically putting it right there in the same place as methamphetamine. So that's what the change there does. Section 3 then amends the crime of unlawful cultivation or distribution of controlled substances. That's KSA 215705. And again, current law has certain penalties that would apply to that kind of controlled substance, but the bill moves those penalties to the same that are provided for methamphetamine and some other drugs. Those would range from a severity level 4 all the way up to a severity level 1, depending on the quantity of the controlled substance and the material that contains that controlled substance. That's how that crime works. And then finally, the fourth section of the bill amends KSA 216805. That's the sentencing grid for drug crimes. And you'll see if you're flipping through the grids on page 11, there's no change to the grid, but it's there for your reference. We were just talking about all those different levels. But the amendment here is on the final page of the bill, page 14. It would add a new special sentencing rule. And I know we have some of the newer members that may not remember how the grid works, but remember on the grid, there's a box that you're in depending on the severity level of your crime and your criminal history. And that box has 3 numbers. There's a lower number, a middle number, and a higher number. You're presumed to get the middle number in the box. Based on your history and your severity. And you can either go upward or downward with certain findings. And then there are a number of special rules here in 216805 that either move you out of presumptive prison or presumptive probation, and also can increase your sentence. And these special rules do both. These special rules, there are 2 of them provided here in the bill. The one in subsection H would provide that the sentence for manufacturing or distributing a controlled substance with respect to material containing any quantity of a fentanyl-related controlled substance will be presumed imprisonment. So that's wherever you are on the levels. And even if you're in a presumptive probation box, it would become presumed imprisonment instead. And secondly, your sentence would be 2 times the maximum duration of the presumptive term of imprisonment. So the middle number of your box, that's your presumptive term. Your sentence would be double that. Okay? That's how that would work. And then the rule in subsection I provides that the sentence for manufacturing or distributing a controlled substance will also be presumed imprisonment and 2 times the maximum duration of the presumptive term if the trier of fact makes a special finding beyond a reasonable doubt, of course, because it's a criminal matter, that the controlled substance involved, because of its appearance or packaging, was likely to be attractive to minors. So this is not necessarily fentanyl. This is more the packaging and the appearance means that the trier of fact finds it was targeted to minors, and you get an enhancement of your sentence due to that. Both of these sentences would be like all other special rules, not considered a departure, not subject to appeal just because that sentence was applied. Your other grounds for appeal are not affected, but this is not considered a departure. It's considered just a normal presumptive sentence that would be given to you under the special rule. Hopefully that answers, or hopefully that explains everything to you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Committee questions. I have one quick question. I see on page 6, starting at line 7, that the definition of possession is stricken. What's the impact of that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Chairwoman. And I, in my haste or in my desire to be short, I didn't give you the little blurb about this is your first conflict resolution that you're seeing of the year. For those of you that have been around, you frequently enact the same statute twice in the same year. So last year you amended KSA 215701 in one bill, and then in another bill you amended it in a different way. We had to publish both of them. We couldn't resolve the conflict before you left, so both of them are on the books. One's at 215701 and one's at 215701 with a letter B at the end of it. In one of those bills, you removed the definition of possession because that definition is in the general criminal code definition section, 2151.11, I think. I don't remember for sure. And rather than have two definitions, the policy choice was just to have one. So this cures the conflict, and you'll see there's an also repealing in line 10 on page 1 of 215701B. So we eliminate the conflict. It's not a substantive change. You've already passed it. It's already law. This just makes sure that it's clean and we have one section going forward.
Thank you. I recall the discussion last session on
And
definition
thank you
of
for
possession.
reminding me to clarify that. Yeah.
Thank you. And with that, then, we will hear from our first proponent conferee, Mr. Stephen Howe, District Attorney, Johnson County, Kansas, who is appearing on WebEx. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee. While he gets established on WebEx, we will hear then from Mr. Greg Smith, also a proponent of the bill, Special Deputy for Government Affairs, Johnson County Sheriff's Office. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee. And committee and conferees, we're going to try to wrap up this discussion around 11:15 if we can. We have another bill to hear today, and committee, if we could have your indulgence and run a little bit past 11:30 today, that would be very helpful so that we don't have to meet on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Greg Smith. I'm the Special Deputy for Government Affairs for the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. We stand in support of Senate Bill 238, primarily because we are encountering fentanyl more and more in our county and finding more and more disturbing situations. For example, in a controlled buy that took place not too long ago, there was a 2-year-old that was standing right there while all of this was going on. It's not uncommon for these operations to be done inside houses where children live, play, and are exposed to this type of thing. The Johnson County coroner, in her report to the Board of County Commissioners last year in December, said that we had 86 deaths attributed to fentanyl in 2021. And 2 years earlier, that total was only 34. So we're seeing an increase in this. The packaging of these things is discussed in this bill. Looks like a bowl of M&Ms or Skittles, and kids are being told it's something else and taking them with tragic results. So we would appreciate you recommending the bill for passage, and happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Committee, any questions? Yes, Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Are we seeing much fentanyl being reduced to a dosage that isn't fatal, or is fentanyl being used more as a poison to kill people?
Well, there's no quality control in the production of the pills or anything like that. You may get one pill that has absolutely no fentanyl in it at all. It's just filler. And the next one may be almost 100% fentanyl. So you just don't know what you're going to get.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Seeing none, then thank you for your testimony today and addressing this very important issue. Next, we will ask Mr. Ed Klump, who is the Legislative Liaison, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Ed Klump and associated with the three associations you listed for me, so I won't run through those again. This is a bill that we do heavily support. This bill is very similar to House Bill 2398, which we've already given testimony over the House side on. The only difference really between this bill and 2398 is this bill adds a provision about packaging controlled substances in a manner likely to attract minors. I think that's a very important addition to the bill, and we support that addition to what is in 2398. So this bill addresses our nationwide fentanyl problem from a different direction than the support for people who are addicted to drugs, take those drugs not knowing that fentanyl is in them, and then end up overdosing on the fentanyl. This is going after the supply chain and the manufacturing chain. And we don't often think about manufacturing of fentanyl in the United States as being a problem, but it is coming. There has been major seizures in New Mexico and Arizona just in the last month of the precursor chemicals needed to produce fentanyl. And that is a sign that the Mexican market is moving its manufacturing into the United States. So this is coming our way. So it's important to include the manufacturing in this. The distribution is the real problem and the manner of distribution. And what we have happening is we have people who believe they're taking a drug. Oftentimes, they're tricked into thinking it's a prescription grade drug because it's pressed into a pill looking like, or put into a capsule looking like, a real prescription drug, and it's not. And those are the drugs that often contain the fentanyl. Even we are finding even in cocaine and other drugs like that, meth, are being laced with fentanyl as well. So this bill goes after those. I won't go into all the details. I think the reviser has covered that. But we do believe this is a very important side of this that has not been addressed in strengthening the law to this point, and that's increasing these penalties for the people that are actually distributing these drugs. They're already illegal drugs, but we need to enhance that penalty when those drugs contain fentanyl, and that's what this bill does. And it also adds that component to make sure that people who are pressing these into pills and putting them in capsules is included in the manufacturing definition. We strongly support this, and we'd ask you to pass it favorably.
Thank you. Committee, questions for Mr. Klump? Seeing none, then thank you very much for appearing in committee today and for your testimony. And then we will turn back to Mr. Stephen Howe, District Attorney for Johnson County, who is listed as appearing on WebEx today. If he's on WebEx, please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Madam Chairwoman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we solved the audio problem. Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you to you and the rest of the committee for giving me an opportunity to testify today, and the convenience of allowing me, because of my schedule, to do this by video. When Senator Warren approached me about this bill, I indicated to her that I strongly support these types of measures to strengthen the penalties regarding fentanyl. And if you look at my testimony in writing, you'll see that in Johnson County, it is a real problem that is growing significantly by the numbers. I had reached out to our medical examiner and our medical director about the numbers in our county, and it's kind of shocking what we're seeing. In a 2-year period, we have doubled the number of overdose deaths directly related to fentanyl. And it is continuing to grow. Our medical examiners reported 4 different types of fentanyl that are showing up on these autopsies. And so when you have modified this law and allowed for all the different derivatives, it's key to our ability to prosecute those individuals. So thank you for doing that. The other scary part of this is the number of overdose that don't result in death. And that is because of the drug Nexlon. It's a lot of people call it Narcan, which is really a life-saving drug that is used thousands of times across this country to save lives. And if you look at those numbers, it is shocking just in our county what we're seeing. If you take our MedAct, our paramedic and ambulance services, some of our fire departments and schools, if you just look at that alone, last year we had 500 different times where Narcan is used to save someone's life. And what I mean by that is literally the person is dead and they are brought back to life because of Narcan. And so to put it in context, if it wasn't for that drug that's available in Johnson County alone, we would have almost 600 deaths from fentanyl. And that is just one county in our state. And I know from talking to our peers, other prosecutors across the state, even in the small jurisdictions, they're starting to see fentanyl showing up. And it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue, not only for first responders, including police, but for our communities in general. And it's taking the lives mostly of our young people, teenagers, young adults. That is really the individuals that are being impacted by this deadly drug. And, years ago when we first started to see this coming to light, I coined it basically as these dealers are dealing death. And that's what they're doing. It's Russian roulette. It's you can take 5 or 6 of these pills and be totally fine, but the next pill will kill you. And that's because unlike other drugs that we take through our pharmacies, legitimate drugs to the FDA, which has really tight controls over the dosages of these drugs, the cartels don't care. And so there are instances where you'll take one pill and then the next one will be 4 times the strength of the one you just took, and it will overload your body and kill you. And so giving us stronger penalties for these people who are dealing death is greatly appreciated by the law enforcement agencies and the prosecutors across the state. When we talk about why should we have some more severe penalties for fentanyl? Well, even drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine, it is very rare that those drugs actually cause death when the drug abusers are using them. But in this instance, it is not a rarity. It is a reality of what we're seeing across this state and across this country. And so giving us the tools to be able to penalize those individuals who are knowingly possessing these drugs and then selling them to other individuals, knowing that they're going to die, is so critically important. A number of years ago, this legislative body gave us the ability to prosecute individuals who sell drugs that cause the death of other individuals or cause them to overdose. And we are using that, but we can't always prove that. And what I mean by that is many users have multiple dealers that they go to. And so sometimes we know that they are overdosing or dying from fentanyl, but we're unsure that we can prove who is the actual dealer that gave them that pill that caused their death. And so by giving us this other tool in our toolbox, being able to go after the actual drug dealers and get greater sentences and take them off the street so they can't kill other people, is greatly appreciated by prosecutors and law enforcement across the state. And so I would ask that you pass this bill out of committee. I think it's much needed. It's part of a multifaceted approach to try to fight fentanyl, including hopefully the federal government will do its part to assist to stop the cartels from selling and bringing the drugs into our country. But secondly, we have to deal with them here, the boots on the ground. And in addition to trying to help those who are basically addicted to this drug, Another component is shutting down the business of selling these drugs. And so this bill does an effective job of allowing us to go after those people who are dealing death. So that's all I have. I will say that there's no indication that the trends will change, that it will continue to grow within our county and across our state. And I appreciate your efforts to try to give us the ability to stem that tide. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, then thank you very much, Mr. Howe, for appearing in committee today and for submitting your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Your comments on this. Thank you. Are there any other proponent, neutral, or opponent conferees in the committee meeting room or on WebEx? Seeing none, then we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 238 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 193, enacting the Reduced Armed Violence Act to increase the criminal penalties for certain violations of criminal possession of a weapon by a convicted felon that involve firearms. With that, a bill brief from the revisor.
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. Jason Thompson, Revisor's Office. Senate Bill 193 will look very familiar to most of you. This is nearly identical to Senate Bill 534 that this committee reported out favorably in March of 2022. It did not get on general orders, so it was not voted on in the Senate, but you did vote it out of committee last year. The only changes to the bill from last time you saw it were just minor technical updates, no change in substance. So this is essentially the same bill that you saw before. So very briefly, for those of you that may not recall or that weren't on the committee at the time, the amendment here is to KSA 216804. This is the sentencing grid for non-drug crimes. So in the last bill, you saw the sentencing grid for drug crimes, which is in 6805, and this is the one for non-drug crimes in 6804. Again, we're dealing with a special sentencing rule. So depending on where you are in the boxes, that's your normal sentence, and then there are these special rules that come in over the top and do something to your sentence. In this case, the new rule would be that a violation of criminal possession of a weapon by a convicted felon would become presumptive imprisonment. So regardless of where you are, the presumption would be prison, not probation. And in addition to any other term of imprisonment you would have, you would get a consecutive sentence for this crime if the trier of fact makes a certain finding. And that finding is beyond a reasonable doubt, of course, because it's, again, a criminal action. Two things. One, the weapon the offender possessed during the violation was a firearm. And two, such firearm was possessed by the offender during the commission of any violent felony. So those are the two keys to get the special rule applied to you. Again, presumptive prison and a consecutive sentence to whatever else you might be serving for your offenses in this trial or in this charge. As used in the special sentencing rule, there's a list of crimes that are defined as violent felony. I won't read all those to you. Again, it's the same list as last year. It's a number of things ranging all the way from capital murder down to felonies that include the domestic violence designation that we provide in the criminal procedure code. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Yes, Senator Haley. We'll need your microphone on so those following along online in the room can hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, is there a companion bill that the House has filed that's working its way through the process? If so, if there is, where's that, please?
Madam Chairwoman and Senator Haley, yes, there is a companion House bill. It was heard in House Corrections, and I'm looking over my shoulder. Has it been passed out of committee yet? Okay. Scheduled to be worked, but has not been worked by the House Corrections Committee yet.
Thank you.
And what's the bill number on that?
2031. Thank you to Mr. Klump for the assist there.
Committee, other questions? Seeing none, then we will hear from proponent conferee, Mr. Greg Smith, Special Deputy for Government Affairs, Johnson County Sheriff's Office. Please introduce yourself, and thanks for still being here in committee today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Greg Smith, Johnson County Sheriff's Office. We did testify on that companion bill that was in the House. This is identical wording as near as I can tell. Basically, what we're looking at here is these folks are a minority of the criminal population, but they are the ones that are committing these violent crimes repeatedly. And this sentencing scheme will allow them to spend more time in prison and less time terrorizing people doing these types of violent crimes. You may have heard on the news this morning, Operation Lone Star 2 was just concluded in the Kansas City metro area. United States Marshals went to the top 10 cities with murder rates per capita. Kansas City is one of those. 60 people were arrested in Kansas City out of a total of 880 of those 10 cities. Those folks traverse across the state line back and forth. These aren't just people that committed murder. We're talking violent rapes, aggravated batteries, those types of things. These are the types of criminals that need to be in prison. So I understand as a former senator the need to worry about bed space. These are the folks that need to take up a bed, and that's why this bill is so important. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And when you mentioned Kansas City, there's a Kansas City, Kansas, and a Kansas City, Missouri. Which city?
Kansas City, Missouri, but the metro area, these people, they're very fluid back and forth across state lines. Don't mean a whole lot.
Sure. Just wanted to be clear about your testimony. And maybe a question for the reviser. This bill applies only to, and for Mr. Smith as well, this bill would apply only to convicted felons who are possessing a weapon illegally, criminal possession of a weapon, and then they are using that weapon in commission of another crime. Do I have that right?
Madam Chairwoman, Jason Thompson, Revisor's Office. So yes, the special rule is for a conviction. So the sentence for the violation of the crime, criminal possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, which is KSA 216304. So that's the offense you're convicted of. That gets you over here to the special rule. So the underlying offense itself is you're already a convicted felon. You're not supposed to have a weapon, and you do. If it's a firearm and it's used for one of these violent felonies, then the special rule applies to you.
Thank you. So we're establishing the special rule for sentencing rather than creating a new crime in law. So thank you. Committee, other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your testimony. Next, we will hear from Mr. Ed Klump, Legislative Liaison from the Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Please introduce yourself, and glad you've remained in the committee meeting room today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Ed Klump for the associations you've listed. Thank you for doing that. We are in very strong support of this. Our associations this year have tried to focus on crimes of violence, especially those involving firearms, and also the fentanyl issue. Those are the two big issues facing public safety in Kansas today. And this bill is one of those bills. The reviser told you this was a bill last year that passed out of this committee, essentially the same as it was, no substantive change. You'll recall the Attorney General brought this bill last year. We kind of took up the charge on these bills this year to make sure they kept going, so that's why we're here. This is very important because we are talking about the worst of the criminals. These are people that have already had conduct that prohibits them from possessing a firearm. They continue to possess a firearm, and not only are they in violation of that law, but now, before the special rule kicks in, they have gone out and committed another violent crime with a firearm. I mean, these are people that are completely ignoring the fact that they're not supposed to be carrying a firearm. These are the people that make good people carrying firearms look bad. And it's important not only from a public safety aspect, but it's an important issue to preserve the rights of those gun owners across the country that are given bad names by these people. So one of the key elements in this is that presumptive imprisonment. A lot of these cases end up being in the border boxes if they've got not a real heavy criminal history yet. And so there's very little penalty that's going to happen. They're going to get put on probation. And then the other fact is the increased sentence or the consecutive sentence. And that's important because many times we see these sentences for the possession of a firearm by a felon just rolled into the other sentencing, which means there's essentially no penalty for it. And so by doing the consecutive sentence, you're assuring these violators they are going to have additional time if they carry a firearm when they do these additional violent crimes. So that's kind of the meat of it, and we strongly support this and ask you to pass it out favorably.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, then thank you, Mr. Klump, for your testimony today. Are there any other proponent, neutral, or opponent conferees in the committee meeting room or on WebEx on Senate Bill 193? Seeing none, then thank you. We will. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have an opponent appearing on WebEx, Mr. Nick Reinecker, private citizen. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for allowing me to speak today. My name is Nick Reinecker, private citizen from Inman, Kansas, and I'm an opponent to Senate Bill 193 due to the inclusion of any felony offense described in KSA 2022 Supplemental 215703 regarding manufacturing, 215705 cultivation or distribution, or 215706 possession. I can support the underlying bill, but do not support this section and would withdraw my opposition if it were stricken. It should be noted, Madam Chair, that in previous hearings, the proponents either didn't believe possession was part of this list or said they were not wedded to this list. So to try to put it in perspective, a rough draft scenario that concerns me is one where we have an individual, let's say a veteran, who after serving his or her country and without a firm familial or spiritual foundation, goes to our current healthcare system for help with flashbacks, anxiety, etc. Through that process, this individual is prescribed many high-powered synthetic pharmaceuticals due to the diagnosis of multiple disorders with appropriate billing codes based on a box checkoff system provided by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. This man or woman is not satisfied with the help given, the diagnosis is received, and the side effects, including the emptying of bank accounts from the medications. This veteran, citizen, individual, man or woman knows some of his or her friends or family who use cannabis as a health maintenance substance, not an idol. And so being this person also cooks and enjoys fresh natural ingredients, he or she decides to grow it for self-reliance and quality assurance purposes. He or she grows some cannabis and, of course, has firearms in the house. Through whatever circumstances, a felony conviction happens. This individual goes through treatment, gets jaded about the system, but fortunately, he has a lax parole officer that doesn't test very often for usage or doesn't apply sanctions for that use. Let's fast forward 5 years. His or her mom gets cancer. He starts growing cannabis again, manufactures some tea, which is an extraction process. You take the green leafy substance, put it in a paper or whatever, and it comes out with an extraction process that's not a fire hazard. Distributes that tea to his mom, all while in possession of the substance and a firearm. So we've taken care of 5703, 5705, and 5706. So I ask you, is this the type of individual we are trying to label worst of the worst? Simple felony possession aside, are these the people that are the most violent and dangerous? I mean, are we that obtuse, arrogant, or inhumane to think that applying the government's sword that should be reserved for violent evildoers should be used on people who plant, process, or possess a natural occurring seed-bearing herb that has food value, industrial economic opportunities, and therapeutic value? This, to me, Madam Chair, is not American. This is not justice. Is this truly the land of the free from socialism and fascism? Tell me this is not the policy trajectory we are trying to make, Madam Chair. Tell me you are going to defend my right to life, liberty, and the pursuit. It was amazing to see the last 3 years those who were so adamantly opposed to the government forcing the people to be injected with a drug. Why doesn't that same passion carry over to what the government says I can't put into my body, especially when it is of natural origin, like raw agriculture commodities and green leafy substances? The Reduced Armed Violence Act sounds really cool for the media and the public at large, and the optics of it are compelling that this law will take people who are committing violence with a gun off the streets. Regardless of previous history, though, possessing a firearm in a car while raping someone in a car is a violent felony. Pressing a firearm against the head of a victim being raped is a violent felony. Most any on that list of violent felonies as they're defined. But Madam Chair, there is no way you can convince me that my possessing a firearm while possessing cannabis, possessing firearm while cultivating cannabis, or possessing a firearm while making cannabis tea is a violent felony. For currently, I can possess a firearm and possess alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and chocolate donuts, legal drugs that anyone can make an idol or be addicted to. But this behavior is not considered violent or a felony. And when I think of our youth, our posterity, and the optics cannabis prohibition gives them, it is hypocritical. It is government that is untrustworthy. We have been soft on crime, used cannabis as a gateway into the criminal justice system by misguided classifications.
Mr. Reinecker, make sure that you continue to testify about the bill that we're hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Nick Reinecker. And now we are suffering the consequences with the need for mitigation to put into place the subjective discretionary tools on the street with peacekeepers and in the courtroom with district attorneys and judges for the defendant management, regardless of constitutionality or uniformity. To fix Senate Bill 193, please take subsection Z3N out if I believe it's not germane, or remove 215706 exclusively, like I believe that the House did last week or something. I think that they have already passed that out of the House Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee, striking 215706, because I don't believe even possession of methamphetamine or fentanyl by a convicted felony or felon and possession of a firearm is a violent felony, even though I believe it should be a 90-day minimum mandatory sentence felony. And then also remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Mr. Reinecker? Yes, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Reinecker, for your continued appeal to take marijuana off of our controlled substance list. I do personally appreciate it. It is relatively innocuous, and it should not be married in this case to enhanced penalties for firearm possession. We share that. Did you make this same, did you testify on, I guess it was the House Bill 2031, which is similar to this one before Senate Bill 193. Did you bring representation in the House on this measure?
Madam Chair, Senator Haley, I did. I have testified in all, I guess it'd be 4 committee hearings regarding the Reduced Armed Violence Act. That is correct.
And similar testimony, Madam Chair, similar testimony as you brought today with the recommendations as to what may be amended in that bill, in that House bill?
Madam Chair, Senator Haley, that is correct. Just taking that section out, I think, would remove any opposition, taking any reference to drug crimes out, because this is technically a drug crime sentence enhancement to violent felonies. And so by taking that section out, it would remove any opposition, unless you wanted to just take 215706 out and then remove cannabis.
Sure. I understand. All right. Point well taken. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Seeing none, then thank you, Mr. Reinecker, for your testimony today and for appearing on WebEx. And before we ask for other conferees, we're going to have a clarification from the reviser on the status of the House Bill 2031 that addressed this contents of this bill as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson, Revisor's Office. And yes, as Mr. Reinecker said, we got our bill numbers mixed up. And so House Bill 2031 was passed out of the House Corrections Committee. It looks like it was reported on Monday, February 6th. So it is now sitting below the line in the House. And as he mentioned, they did amend the bill before sending it out. So the report that's pending to be adopted by the House removes KSA 215706 from that provision, as he was just discussing.
And could you remind committee of what 215706 is?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, 215706 is the drug crime of possession. 5103 is manufacture. 5703 is manufacture. 5705 is distribution, and 5706 is possession. So possession is the one that was removed.
Thank you, committee. Other questions for the reviser? Seeing none, then I'll ask again, are there any other proponent, neutral, or opponent conferees in the committee meeting room or on WebEx? All right, this time, seeing none for sure, we will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 193. Committee, we have, you'll recall, suspended Senate Bill 2. We're still waiting for gathering some answers and responses to the questions that were posed to primarily Kansas Department of Revenue, to the insurance industry. And so we will leave that hearing suspended. And with that, then again, please be prepared to work bills tomorrow. Please have your written balloon amendments prepared to bring to committee as well to consider. And because we are adding to the agenda for tomorrow, February 16th, possible final action on bills previously heard. So with that, committee, then, thank you for your attention. Thank you for those in the committee meeting room, conferees, those following along online, and to our staff as well. And with that, then, we are adjourned.